Welcome back, everyone. We will be starting the next session shortly. Just a reminder that Q&A links and French captions can be found in the chat. Our first speaker this hour is Lucy Diaz. Lucy is a passionate activist for accessible washrooms. She is a member of Accessible Washrooms for All and was named a difference maker of 2022 by the Rick Hansen Foundation. Welcome, Lucy.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to my presentation, Are Washrooms in Canada's National Parks Accessible? Let's get started. Next slide. So, who am I? I have white skin, short curly brown hair, and white glasses. I am wearing a red shirt. I use she, her pronouns. There's a picture of me on the side, but my hair is straight, and I am wearing a black shirt with a black suit jacket. My name is Lucy Diaz. I am 15 years old, and I advocate for accessibility. I do this for my sister who has cerebral palsy and some other disabilities, and I've been advocating for about 4 years now, and I have learned many things on the way. Next slide. So here's what I'll be speaking about today. We'll talk about the major barriers in washrooms, what is needed to overcome those barriers. I'll give examples of places where this has been implemented in parks, and then we'll move on to a Q&A if we have any time. Next slide. There are 48 national parks in Canada, covering over 300,000 square kilometers, and over 2,000 provincial and territorial parks. These parks contain hundreds of species, incredible views, and important cultural and natural significance. All Canadians are entitled to the ability to visit these parks, but many cannot. There are many barriers to be addressed both in and out of parks, and a major barrier is the washrooms. The lack of truly accessible washrooms in parks prevents my family and so many others from enjoying the beauty our country has to offer. Thousands of people cannot go to parks because they cannot do basic bodily functions. That being said, let's get into exactly what is wrong with these washrooms. And the image on the slide is of Moraine Lake in Banff National Park. Next slide. There are many barriers in washrooms, but the 4 biggest ones that I have personally seen are information, space, doors and paths, and equipment. Next slide. Let's start with information. Before going anywhere with my little sister, we must research that place extensively. However, usually there is barely any information available. And not only is there little information, but it's hard to find. I found that usually sites mention that there is a washroom, but never specify. Is the path to the washroom paved? Is it inclined? How wide are the doors? What's the turning space? This information is needed to know if the park is actually accessible for my sister. What might be accessible for one person may not be accessible for another. There is an image on the slide showing a screenshot from the accessibility page of Revelstoke National Park. All it says is washrooms without any specifications. Next slide. Another major barrier is doors. Often I found that doors are extremely heavy and without an automatic door opener. They're also very narrow, which would prevent many people from not only opening, but fitting wheelchairs through. There are also instances where paths to washroom are made of gravel, which can be very difficult to navigate in a wheelchair. They're also often on hills, which can make it even more difficult. I've experienced this so many times with my little sister having to push an extremely tall 13-year-old and a heavy wheelchair up a gravel hill is not easy. So the image is of a small washroom with an accessible washroom sign that is about 3 feet off the ground on a concrete block with no way to actually get to it. Next slide. It doesn't get any better once you're actually inside, though. Accessible washrooms are almost always too small. Wheelchairs can be very big and you need maneuvering space, both for the wheelchair itself and for moving the person. However, there is barely enough room. And once you bring a caregiver or assistant into the equation, it's practically impossible for many people to fit inside the washroom. It also leads to sometimes having to leave wheelchairs outside the washroom or stall. I've encountered this problem so many times, and it makes life very difficult. The image shows a toilet with grab bars in a corner. Next slide. The washroom itself also lacks equipment that is very necessary for many people. The current accessible washrooms only contain a tall toilet and grab bars. This is excluding thousands of people from being able to access these washrooms and places. My sister, like so many others, needs to use a diaper, and we need a place to change her, but she no longer fits on the baby changing table. So our choices are two. We put her on the floor of a disgusting outdoor public washroom, or we go home. And let's say we forget our dignity and my sister's fragile health and put her on the floor. How are we supposed to carry a 5'7" tall girl from her wheelchair to the floor, consistently without harming our backs and shoulders? And what if someone can stand but needs help maneuvering and needs two caregivers? When the toilet is in the corner, it does not give enough space for another caregiver to help. The image is of a toilet with grab bars, and I apologize for the almost identical pictures, but there's not much to take pictures of in the current accessible washrooms. I also want to point out that the image is of a clean washroom, and public washrooms are often extremely dirty, especially in parks, because of mud, water, and sand. Next slide. So, accessible washrooms are not actually accessible. However, disabled people deserve to be able to leave their houses and live a fulfilled life, and this includes going to parks. Without washrooms, which are made to fulfill a basic bodily function, disabled people and their families cannot go. And this is a worldwide problem that people have created solutions for. Next slide. Now, what is needed to fix these barriers? We need information online with exact information. How wide are the doors? Are the paths paved? Are they made of gravel? What equipment does a washroom have? With this information, people can gauge if the washrooms are accessible for them. Once there, if the paths are paved or made of something not that difficult to traverse, it can be accessible for many people. The door should be operable with a button, but if that is not possible, at least not too heavy and not too narrow. There should be proper equipment in place. This can include a hoist, an adult changing table, and a peninsular toilet. There are many other details that can be added for further accessibility, but for the sake of time, I can only mention these 4 things. Next slide. Many organizations have different standards for a genuinely accessible washroom. However, the most prominent, I would say, is Changing Places, which began in the UK. The standards they have include everything I covered and more. There are now many more organizations with their own standards for whatever fits a location. There are permanent changing places, but also mobile and more compact ones. Many countries have both permanent and mobile ones, but Canada only has a couple of permanent washrooms and only a couple of mobile ones, and none of those are in parks. So I'll be showing a couple images. Next slide. The first image is of a changing place, which shows a large washroom with white walls. There is a silver adult changing table on the right attached to the wall. There is a toilet with grab bars and space on both sides. Directly in front of where the camera is facing, there is a blue foldable screen that can be pulled out to give privacy. Beside the screen is a hoist. The tracks for the hoist are on the ceiling of the washroom. And finally, to the left, there is a white height-adjustable sink with a mirror above it. Next slide. The next image is of a Rise washroom. On the left, there is a picture of the inside showing a peninsular toilet with grab bars, a blue foldable screen, a height-adjustable sink, and a hoist on the ceiling. The adult changing table is not in the picture, but it's in the washroom. On the right, there is an image of the outside. It is a small blue rectangular building with a pink door. There are stairs and a ramp leading to it. Next slide. The final image is of a Mobiloo. It is a large truck with space in the back. The door is open, through which the picture shows part of the hoist and the adult changing table, as well as a toilet and sink. There are stairs as well as a lift in order to get inside the truck as it is separated from the ground. Next slide. Now let's look at how other countries have made their parks more accessible by adding a changing place or a changing place like washroom. Next slide. The UK has 1,739 registered changing places. Legislation requires all new and majorly renovated buildings to have a changing place installed. Many parks and beaches have a changing place either on site or nearby. There are also Mobiloos, which are changing place like washrooms fitted inside a truck. These washrooms can be taken to events or other areas where it can be difficult to build, like parks. There is yet another option. Rise builds transportable changing places. It's not completely mobile, but another good option. Next slide. Spain only has one, but it is at a beach. The washroom itself was outfitted into a shipping container and transported to La Playa de la Nova Icaria in Barcelona. This cambiador inclusivo, which translates to inclusive changer, allows disabled people to visit the beach without worrying that they have to go home to go to the washroom. Even if Spain only has one, this proves that it is possible to have a facility like this somewhere outdoors in nature. Next slide. Costa Rica also has cambiadores inclusivos. The Red Costarricense de Turismo Accesible, which translates to the Net of Accessible Tourism of Costa Rica, manages mobile cambiadores inclusivos, which can be found in beaches. Other countries have permanent, mobile, and temporary washrooms like Australia and Germany. Next slide. So, accessible washrooms in territorial, provincial, and national parks are not actually accessible. And there are so many individuals and families that cannot go to parks because they're denied access to a basic facility. There are solutions like changing places and mobiloos in the UK, which would help to make parks accessible to everyone. There are many other things needed to make parks truly accessible, but washrooms are very important. Next slide. So thank you for listening. There are so many things that I wasn't able to say, but there's a lot more information online, and I believe we have time for a Q&A.
Thank you, Lucy. My goodness, that is so much fantastic research on accessible washrooms. We have a question from the audience about financial barriers and costs of these. Do you know offhand how expensive some of these options are, or maybe what the most affordable one would be?
I guess the most expensive things in the washroom would be the hoist and the adult changing table. The adult changing table, I believe, is within the range of maybe 2,000 to 5,000 for a height adjustable one. That is, there are cheaper ones if you want it to be permanently attached to the wall. And the hoist, I think, would be around $10,000. So they are kind of pricey, but it is worth it because in the long run, it provides so many more places that disabled people can go and so much more accessibility.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I was curious if those mobiloos were perhaps a more like affordable option, being a little bit more like non-permanent.
Yeah, they are more compact and you can take them to wherever you want. I believe there are a couple, not exactly mobiloos, but it is under a different name, but very similar in Canada. I believe it's in Ottawa, but we have pretty much none anywhere else.
Fair, fair. Um, I totally feel you about the state of some of the washroom floors and stuff, especially in parks where things get muddy and grimy. Have you had a chance to come across like a fantastic accessible washroom in even like a local or provincial or national park that perhaps parks could use as an example to replicate elsewhere?
Um, I haven't found any that would work for my sister in parks at all, anywhere. I guess the closest would be in a hospital, which is made for care, but not really in parks anywhere, unfortunately.
All right, so a long way to go then. But you did share some fantastic examples in other countries, so hopefully,
Mhm.
we can be taking those and really applying them here. I have another question from someone asking if it's sort of feasible for people to bring their own slings to changing places, and would that be useful in areas that don't have power?
Um, so yeah, you definitely bring your own slings to a changing place. Slings are something that you personally take because of size and other liability reasons. And there are mobile lifts that are not permanently attached to the ceiling, but they can be transported to a washroom and then taken elsewhere for charging during the day or at the end of the day. So there are other options other than a place, other than a ceiling where it has to have power.
That could be a good option for parks that don't necessarily have good consistent access for power or any access for power. If park staff can deliver it in the morning fully charged and then pick it up in the evening and take it somewhere else to be charged, that could be like a really great option.
Definitely. It's amazing. There's a lot of different options to create a truly accessible park. You don't have to just go with one specific thing.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much for this research. I think what we'll do at this stage is collect the rest of the questions because I do see them coming in. Um, and we'll send those off to you to have you answer for our Slack channel.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Lucy. It was fantastic to have you here today.
Fantastic to be here.